In this fourth podcast, we're going to look at how we can take our graphs and data tables that we've made in Excel and integrate them into a lab report. We're going to also look at how we can enhance the look at the graphs so that they look more like traditional graphs plotted on graph paper. And then we're going to see how we can take these data tables and graphs and put them into a Word document. So here's the data we had prepared from last time. We've got the graph looking very nice, the data tables hiding in the background, and this is what we want to eventually transfer over to a Word document so that we can integrate it into our lab report. But before I take it over and copy and paste it into Word, I want to change the look of this graph, as I said, to make it look a little bit more like traditional graph paper. So I need to format the axes. Now I can select various parts of the graph to format many different things, but I just want to look at the plot area. At the moment it just includes horizontal lines, no vertical lines, so it's a little difficult to see what's going on. So if I click and select this area here, you can see that these numbers have been selected, and if I control click on this area, I get a drop down menu which allows me to add minor grid lines or even format the major grid lines. The major grid lines are already there, those are the grey lines we can see, but there's no minor grid lines. If I click on minor grid lines, we can see that it's added lines in between the major grid lines. It's beginning to look more like graph paper. If I click on the x-axis numbers down the bottom here, and again control click, try that once more. I was control clicking on the wrong thing there, control clicking on the numbers. We can see that I can add major grid lines and I can add minor grid lines. So let's add the major grid lines first, and then control click on the number, any number will do, and add the minor grid lines, and now it's looking a little bit more like graph paper. So that's fine. I can format the data points. I can format all manner of different things, but this is how I want it to look at the moment. So my next goal is to take this across and put it into a Word document so that I can integrate this into a lab report. So I have my Word document already open, and I've given myself a heading results. And the good thing about using Microsoft Word with Excel is they're compatible and we can copy and paste from one to the other. So if I go back to my Excel, I've got my graph and the data table in the background. Now I'm going to slide the graph down out of the way so I can see my data tables, and I want to copy and paste those across so that I have the data tables there. Now I've just noticed that actually I need to put a border around this table. If I don't put a border around this table here, the numbers will just appear without a border. So I'm going to put a border around these ones here. They don't have a border as yet. And here's my border tool up here. I want to put a border around all borders. So there we have it. And now I'm going to copy and paste these tables across. Slide that over so I can see everything. Select what I want to copy. On a Mac it's Command C for copy. Go back to Word. Command V for paste. And there's my first data table. And go back to Excel again. Select by clicking and dragging. Command C for copy. Back to Word. Give myself a bit of space there. Command V for paste. And finally, I'm going to take my graph, highlight the graph. Command C for copy. Back to Word. A bit more space. Command V for paste. And there are the three pieces I want in my results section. Now I want to add a few headings to these things. So I can move them down a little bit so I can fit a title in there. I can call this table something like the effect on drop time of ball height. I want to underline that and unbolden it, and maybe put another space underneath that, and maybe I'll call it table 1. The effect on drop time of ball height. It's okay. This one here, table 2. Let's call that height versus average time. And again, I'm going to unbolden that and underline it. As you noted, my graph leapt to the other page, a new page over there, because there was no longer any or enough space for it under there. So I can stick with that if I want. I can change the size of the graph if I want, so it does fit in over there, but that would probably mean the graph would end up being a bit too small. So I'm going to see if I can make the graph a little larger, since I've now got a bit more space. You can see that I can change the size of the graph. I can drag down there, make it a little deeper. I can make it a little narrower if I wanted to do that. I can't drag it into a different position, but I can change the size so it looks how I want it to look. I already included a title on the graph, so I don't need another title. So that's all looking pretty good. What I do want to include, though, is something down here just to explain what the graph does and why I've included the graph. So I'm going to stop the bold and stop the underline there, and I'm going to say something along the lines of the average drop time versus the height will be plotted to show the relationship between these two variables. It's just a little sentence just to lead on from this data table here, this process data table, onto the graph. And below the graph, I need to draw attention to this equation here, because the equation tells me the relationship between the two variables. From the graph, or more specifically from the trend line, of the graph, we can see that the relationship between the average drop time and the height of the ball is so I want to put the equation in here. Now I can't quite see it there, it's very small. I'm just going to go back to Excel where I can see it more clearly. It says y equals 0.44 x to the power of 0.48. Y so I want to put in the equation y equals 0.44 x to the power of, and up here I'll find my superscript button, click that, 0.48. Where y is the average time and x is the drop height. Okay, now I'm just looking back at that, and it looks like my 0.48 wasn't superscripted for some reason, so I'm just going to put a space there, select that 0.48, and I'm going to click the superscript again, and that's looking much better. So that's fine. I can now include these two pages. I've shrunk them so you can see. I can now include these two pages into a lab report. This is my results section. It's got my raw data, my process data, and it's got my data graph with just a little statement to say what the equation tells me. And I can add that to the aim, hypothesis, method, and the conclusion evaluation sections.